Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this out there on the World Wide Web. This is Jeremy Geelan for SYS-CON TV with a Cloud Expo power panel that you do not want to miss. I won't delay a moment longer because we've got four of, I think, the most interesting people that have ever discussed cloud computing here in our Times Square studio, starting with Greg O'Connor.
Hi, Jeremy. How are you? I'm Greg O'Connor, and I'm with AppZero. AppZero is the grease for the cloud. So we're about tapping the app and making applications mobile.
Tapping the app. Tony Bishop is to his left. Tony.
Hey, Jeremy. Nice to see you again. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Tony Bishop, CEO and founder of Adaptivity. And as you're going to hear from these gentlemen today, they're all going to tell you how they have technology and services that can help you. We are the firm that's going to help you blueprint and figure out how to design and leverage the cloud.
Greasing the cloud, leveraging and blueprinting the cloud. Scott.
Jeremy, listen, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Scott Morrison. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Layer 7 Technologies. We're essentially about giving you the confidence to move out into the cloud safely and securely.
So watch this space. And last but absolutely not least, Marty.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm Marty Gauvin. I run Virtual Ark, and we're about reinventing IT outsourcing for the cloud.
So, four top players, but they're here not just to represent their companies, if you don't mind my putting those words into your mouth, but also to help dissect where we are with cloud computing, where we're going with cloud computing, and what are we missing. I want to just put it to all of you, perhaps we'll all have a shot at this. We've been told about these conjunctions before. We've actually been told about perfect storms before, if the viewers don't mind my saying that. And here we are again. What is so different this time round that is making cloud computing, because you cannot doubt it, explode across the land, across the world, which is one of the things, we're going to need data points to back that up, but I am suggesting that's what's going on. Greg, why is it different this time round? Is this really the perfect storm?
This is totally the perfect storm. There's a tremendous amount of flexibility. I think flexibility is the key word here, and it's that, costs can now be moved from where you're going out and having fixed costs to variable costs. You can now move applications in your infrastructure across machines, across data centers, out to the cloud, and it just enables a whole set of flexibility that comes down to huge cost savings. And how can you not do that? There's just a tremendous amount of benefit.
Tony.
Well, I'd probably build on what he said, but I would challenge the viewers to think of it even broader. Globalization has affected the business model. The business model needs a new supply chain. IT is that new supply chain, and the cloud is the new delivery model that exploits the agility, the economics, and everything that was just stated.
4 stages. Go back over it again for viewers, because it's very, very nice. Globalization.
Globalization has affected the business model.
Everyone agree? Everyone with that?
Yep.
Right.
And?
IT is the new supply chain.
Isn't that a great phrase? IT is the new supply chain. Next.
And based on the new supply chain, cloud is the new delivery paradigm.
Hold that thought. Cloud is a new delivery paradigm. I think we're going to be hearing that a lot. Scott.
Listen, I think the key is the driver and where it's coming from. This one isn't about technology. Let's face it, everyone around here are technologists. We're in love with all the latest things. We probably all went out and bought iPads the other day. But the thing about cloud is that cloud is bringing together new cost models and that are very, very obvious to people who aren't about technology. Cloud isn't going to be driven by us, okay? Cloud is going to be driven by the CEO or the CFO. This is the person who's going to come into the CIO's office one day, and he's going to be the one who slaps down that copy of Business Week. It's all dog-eared because he spent the whole plane ride back from Zurich actually reading this thing. He's going to say, I want this. I get this. I get this change in the business model, and I want you to do it. Make that happen. That's why cloud is interesting. Cloud is going to come from the executive suite. It's not actually going to come up from the trenches the way some people think.
And that's what you're contending. That is completely different to any other trend, wave, vogue. This is what's so unusual about cloud computing.
Fundamentally, that's what it's
about. Is
he
onto something so far, just generally onto something?
He's got potential.
Marty.
From my perspective, IT has always been about a cost, and it's a cost wherever you go. It's a capital cost, it's an ongoing operational cost. What the cloud does is it offers the opportunity for businesses to become more agile in terms of the way in which that cost is executed on. If you want no cost next month, stop. Just stop using that application or whatever it is. The cost doesn't need to continue. Yet you can pick it up again a week later, a month later, a year later. And the ability to put things down, pick them up, and also the ability to move your business forward at the speed that the executive suite wants to move it forward, rather than being dragged along by IT. So if you'd like to implement a new application and you need it in a week or even in a day, the cloud makes that possible, particularly when you then combine that with SaaS and the operational layers that you can then sit on top of that from a next generation outsourcing model.
Now, it won't surprise you to hear that I'm going to play devil's advocate on that, because what I'm hearing, I'm listening to that and I'm thinking it does seem deeply appealing. But let's imagine that's a little like parenting, a new model of parenting. What I'm worried about is how anybody is going to adapt to that. Because here's what I'm thinking in my funny little way. That, okay, you go to your children, I know you have a lot of children, I have a lot of children, probably between us we have way too many children, and you say to them, things have changed, chapesses, the way we're going to do things changes. I'm your dad, but only if you need me. Anytime you don't need me, just I'm gone. That's really going to free me up, a lot of bandwidth, a lot of time, I've got all these interests, play some golf, write some novels, research some new white papers, and when you need me, I'll be instantaneously, you'll be instantly re-provisioned with your father. And this goes, by the way, also for your mother. They're going to sort of go, and I'm thinking that business is going to do the same. So this is too abstract, too wonderful. You said the CIO is going to rush down, Scott. I want it, but I think he's going to run away. He's going to go, that's way too complicated. Just give me my steady, horrible overheads, because everyone's used to that.
But the father application...
They're not agreeing with me.
The father application that you're referring to, when you have lots of children, then the demand on the father application can only be met by the resources that you have available. But you shift the father to the cloud, then you can actually call upon multiple fathers. But let's take another application from your domestic environment. What about the cleaner application? Now you've got a cleaner that comes in once a week, but wouldn't it be nice after the school holidays if she could actually come just 3 days, just in a row,
every now and again,
just fix up all that stuff, but not without you. But you can decide that in an instant. You can say, look, so actually, just stay on.
It's the on-demand service aspect that any CEO will get it, Jeremy. Yes. Trust us. Yeah? That's what you're saying. Just be very polite.
But even to being able to allocate more or less father, now there's a competitive nature to it, right? IT was pretty much locked in, but now there's competition within this service, right? So I can, if I don't like you as a father, maybe I can upgrade and get a better father,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So there's the ability to change and move, and whether that's your applications or move to a different service. So competition coming in is going to force, fundamentally, a huge change in IT. So
and it's
think about competitiveness in IT. That just doesn't exist in the past 40 years.
The child becomes a consumer of fatherdom.
That's right. And
in the same way that
they can upgrade.
CEO,
It's father as a service.
Yes, father as a service.
FaaS.
We invented it here. It's FaaS, and it's available from Times Square via SYS-CON TV. So look, that's really, I'm just reacting to that thought of adoption. So why don't we just try and unpack that a little? If it's a perfect storm, and you guys are all running fast-moving companies, you are clearly hearing just what we've talked about. You're hearing, yeah, right. And you've addressed that and you've overcome it and say, no, really, this time. So let's imagine that we've got to that stage and they go, okay, well then that's good because I'm all ears. What do we say next? What is the biggest transformation, business transformation, that the cloud is enabling or will enable? I don't know where you are on the timeline, whether this is happening or might happen or will happen. So, Scott.
Well, I think the key thing is and the key challenge is going to be the fundamental change that people have to go through. Because if you look at the current state of operations and basically the people that keep the lights on in existing IT, those are the people that are going to be affected the most. they're the ones that are going to see that fundamental change. And quite frankly, a lot of them are going to be very worried because all of a sudden...
these actual employees...
absolutely.
So we're saying that that's...
That is
I'm not saying it's a barrier, but we're saying it's an issue.
No, I think
so
it's
as a
an issue,
manager, be aware of it, and if you're one of those
yeah.
developers, maybe,
Yeah.
we're talking about?
Yeah, because let's face it, large organizations don't like to change rapidly in that. And I think we've seen other tech trends where a certain desire to keep things in the status quo has really actually sat in front of real change. SOA was a great example of that. I think one of the big problems with SOA, and there were many problems with SOA, and many of us around here, around this table, actually have all the scars and the war wounds actually to attest to this. But one of the big problems was the change that it required, and the fact that different people in different parts of the organization suddenly had to change roles. All of a sudden, technologies were suddenly spread out amongst multiple departments. You had to get people to cooperate in new ways. And then you had to suddenly do this big overall change. On Tuesday, everything was going to be SOA. So the big question I have, and the big thing that worries me is, on Wednesday, everything's going to be cloud. Will that work? And how effectively will that work? Or will we get bogged down in the same mud and mire of just internal politics fighting? And that's the big concern I have for large organizations moving into the cloud.
Well, one answer to that, I would imagine, is that if the drivers are dynamic enough and the momentum is huge enough, so let me ask on behalf of the audience, Tony, is that the case, that right now the drivers are extraordinary? I mean, they are extraordinary.
Yeah, and it's funny because it almost seems like it's a dichotomy coming on my friend here, Scott, because he's like, one side he's going, it's coming from the C-suite, right? And we all know the only change that really on a large-scale basis occurs in large organizations is from the C-suite down, whether it's an operational risk paradigm or it's a new product or a new business unit, right? So now you finally have technology, which is entrenched. It's also entrenched financially, operationally, emotionally, culturally, and yet it has to end up going to where it needs to go, which is this fundamental new business model. So what I'd say is yes, we have the classic IT challenges, but a lot of those challenges usually come with a bottom-up grassroots kind of movement because this is the right thing to do, versus if it's mandated coming down, now's the time that I would pose to those looking at going to the cloud that haven't already started is you have to. You have to, and you have to exploit that C-suite dominance of the process to drive it through, because this does create a new operating model. That new operating model both translates economically and it translates into the quality of service, continuing upon what we've all agreed and spoken about so far.
Greg, is Tony being too dogmatic? You have to.
No, you absolutely have to. But I think what we see is there are a lot of dev people, ops people who are using the cloud, and whether it's sanctioned and pushed from top down, there's a tremendous amount of people that are using cloud, and they're not waiting for machines to show up, or they're not waiting for their internal cloud to be built. They're going off to Amazon or GoGrid, and they're doing their thing, and it is definitely a grassroots movement on that side. And then on the C level, everyone's like, oh, I can save money, and all the business benefits we've mentioned here are saying, what are we going to do? And I think it's in the middle where the CIO and the budget owners and the people are, have to learn, have to understand how this really affects the operations, and that's getting, I think, squeezed from both sides. So it's going to happen, it's happening, and probably the people who, under the most duress are the people in the middle who are getting pushed from both sides.
All right, well, hold that thought for a moment then. Let me go with this, because obviously there is a major cloud elephant in the Times Square studio called security. We're perhaps divided, or we've got different spectrums as to, whether it's coming from the bottom or from above, or it's going to be both. One thing that's quite clear, if you tell me that the cloud's being used in enterprises, basically on an unsanctioned basis, I'm thinking that there may be security liabilities implicit in that statement that must have CEOs like yourself quivering at night.
Certainly, the security is, I think, one of the top reasons for people are, worried or concerned about the cloud, right? And I think if you look at Amazon, they have to have, I think, an awesomely secure environment. The amount of people and the amount of access that cloud providers are going to do a great job of securing the perimeter, the internal operations, the data, but that's different than how it was before. So just going through that difference and understanding it is is where those middle people are stuck. So yeah, I see a lot of people. I got my group off doing cloud and they're using it, and the middle management group is upset about that and trying to build their own cloud internally. So they get that competition thing that we talked about going. And they raised the fear, uncertainty, and doubt about security as a reason to not go there. And security is a big fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and no one really knows where 100% security doesn't exist. So fear, uncertainty, and doubt is going to slow the adoption down, and that's the pressure in the middle.
Marty, is cloud security an oxymoron?
The interesting thing about cloud security is it's not bad, it's just different. And this, I think, is the problem that most organizations are facing, is this point that the cloud requires you to think differently about a lot of things, and security is one of the main ones. This sort of leads to a different kind of dichotomy between new companies and old companies. New companies like mine, we don't own a server. Everything that we do is on the cloud. And we've been able to build all of our model, security, operationally, and so forth around applications that are available on the cloud. And I would contend that it is possible for enterprises to do that today. The challenge is...
Possible or desirable?
Desirable if they can
or
get the...
Both, yes.
But it depends upon one thing. For enterprises, they need to manage their risk, and that means moving the applications that they're familiar with, that they've been operating for, in many cases, 5, 10, 15 years, to the cloud. Why would you want to change everything? You don't just want to move cities and change cars and change schools and change jobs.
Right,
it's got to be...
Right.
Yeah. So one of the key challenges for the cloud, one of the things that is yet to come, is the migration of the applications that large companies that have been around for some time, that they want to use, the applications they want to use, being available for them on the cloud.
So let me get this right. What you're saying is that the tipping point when enterprises
Yes.
do that? That's when we all know that this is, completely inevitable. I mean, like you were saying, you have to.
Yes.
That's the proof point of that. You
Yes.
have to be, because look, they just did it, and they just did it.
And one of the big challenges there is it's not just a technological challenge. It's a commercial challenge for these software companies, because it's about shifting their billing models and so forth. And we spend a lot of our time working with ISVs to have them understand the way in which the billing models have changed for the cloud, because it's no longer a per seat per month or a fixed license fee.
Right.
It's got to be tied to the benefit that they're accruing.
Right, that makes sense.
And I think, let me pick up on something Marty said, which I think is really important, is that the key to the whole security problem in the cloud is you really do have to think different. You have to approach it in a completely new model. And there are approaches, I think, to effectively secure the cloud. But people need the confidence in understanding that they can do that effectively. Think about how we do security now. We've got this model of a perimeter, the castle wall, all the way around our existing enterprises. You can't do that in the cloud, though. You can't go up and knock on the door of Amazon and say, here's my little wall, give me my own little space in here. Because that really doesn't work very effectively. You have to start moving up the stack, thinking more about what are the services you're trying to protect, what are the applications you're trying to protect, and how effectively you can essentially wrapper those and give yourself a security model that gives you that confidence that people can't attack that one system, that one application, those services that are encompassed there. And there are approaches to do that, but we need to actually move our approaches, take them out into the cloud with us.
What, when you are dealing with your colleagues or with your wives or out on the street, what is the single most pregnant example that you're able to come up with right now that simply defines what cloud computing is or exemplifies its benefits, that you just know is bomb-proof, that when you've got somebody and you've got a little bit of time with them, it's like the elevator pitch, not for your company, but for the cloud. What would it be, Marty? Anything? Any magic example?
For me, it has really been the formation and the operation of the business I currently run. So
I am doing it, so you could be doing this.
Absolutely.
Right, okay.
We are eating our own dog food.
Right.
So when staff turn up to my business, they receive a backpack. That is a backpack that allows them to not only run their office from whatever cafe or Starbucks they happen to be in, but it allows them to be the head office. And that's really what the cloud does. It
to be the head office on your behalf, you mean? Or?
It means that from there they can access all of everything that we do.
Right.
So
right. They're not on some lower echelon because they're in the Starbucks.
Yes.
Okay, in that sense.
Yes, and so that's the kind of thing that the cloud delivers, and it's something that's the other point, I guess, is one that I would raise, is that it's something that allows you to scale to an arbitrary level. So I can run in the same way whether I have 6 staff or 6,000 staff.
Right, I get that. That's interesting. So no constraints, and total scalability. Other examples?
I
like that.
I was just going to.
It's easy in the cloud. It's a good answer.
It is, and I would actually take it to a different paradigm for people to relate to, because what happens is they hear certain words and then the media creates a buzz. No offense to you, Jeremy. But right, like you think of the capital markets world,
right,
and you think of trusted markets over network connected environments that have accessibility via any public browser that could participate if you're known and you have an account and so on. And you think of the size, security, latency, scale, so on. They've been doing it, and it's probably one of the industries that a lot of lessons can be drawn from, because you have market makers, you have market consumers, you have globalization linked to it together between markets, security, technologies like he was talking about, where you're looking at the movement information versus the transaction versus who the user is. Do you get to know who the other person is or not, or is it just the price? Is it the individual unit, etc.? So I would actually challenge people that there are proof points already there, and it's funny when you state that to use for my wife, being that she is a scientist. I tried to teach her about how capital markets is an example of it, and then the fact that you can access that, make that accessible via a browser anywhere, anytime, has been how I've been able to relate it. And that is what most clients start to, if they look at it from a business context, like the gentleman's saying, versus just a technology concept. It changes the paradigm, and that's where I think people need to think to go to.
Any clever ones, Greg?
Well, I have 5 kids, so I have to explain to them how this works. And the example for them is really Facebook, and it's the ubiquity and the scale, and how quickly they were able to ramp up and share with their friends. But that's much different than the business people in Wall Street that I talk to that have 50,000 applications. They've never been able to get rid of an application, and even though they only run some of them once a week, they're now, I'd say on the other side of the equation, getting rid of those apps, right? Because they can move them, and it costs 1/100th of what it costs to have a dedicated person managing that machine, the dedicated infrastructure, and to be able to take, those thousands of apps that have grown up and never go away in the data center and move them sort of piece by piece or get rid of them, that's really different. So it's not like SOA where you got to do everything. You can move piece by piece, and parts of the organization are moving without you, so you got to take into account that as well.
You, I think, were contending that multi-tenancy isn't an issue. I mean, we haven't really covered that, but it seems to be you're very confident that it's okay. Lots of stuff on
multi-tenancy. There's lots of different ways to partition data, and that should be a whole power panel all by itself.
It should be.
There's plenty of technologies out there. It's not a technology problem.
Push beyond that.
A perception problem.
If I take for a moment as read, or we take as read out there watching this, that multi-tenancy is being dealt with, right? Let's perhaps even accept that security is being dealt with. I'm going to be like really credulous here for a moment on behalf of people watching, saying, okay, I really think this is going places. Oh, hang on a sec, what about physics? What about geography? So I've been reading that you've sorted out multi-tenancy, but you sorted it out in China. Now I'm not so excited all over again. So where are we on that? Oh. Where are we on the geography of where my data went to? I'm not sure I like this idea that it's just out there, because I found out it's in another country. You never tell. I mean, what are the disclosures? I'm sure this is a custom and practice thing. We are the first people to put it in an island. Sounds great, with armed guards, until you tell me the island is out of the jurisdiction of the United States law. And then I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So where are we on that? The geography, physics, I don't know how, I think of that as the geography of the cloud.
That's a huge area, actually. And it's not just the knee-jerk thing of, oh, my data's all, out of country, where all of a sudden it's, there's compliance issues, there's issues of who's owning that data, there's issues of how long it's going to be kept around. Those are all very well articulated. I think the thing that people are missing in a lot of cases is latency. There's one law that you can't break, and that's the speed of light.
So it's the physics.
And yeah, exactly. It's, it's going to take, even if you're going across the continent, it's probably going to take you 35 milliseconds to get out there and back. Most of our applications are actually built with this idea of very low latency. We're all in one place. Everything can communicate very quickly. All of a sudden in the cloud, it's different. You've got a long-distance telephone conversation. You've got those little latencies which don't sound like much. I mean, what's a millisecond here or there? But honestly, as you go out across half the world, it's significant. It makes a difference. And this is part of the think differently, design differently, architect differently thing that people have to get their heads around if they're moving out into the cloud.
It's not a showstopper, but it's a parameter, a new parameter.
It's also something which it doesn't have a single answer. So where my data lives is when you then start taking into account latency. Some of your the viewers may notice that I'm actually from Australia. And we find, particularly when you're going across the other side of the Pacific, you've got to then think about where various layers of your application actually sit. So it's not just where's my database, it's where's my business logic, it's where's my presentation layer and so forth. So all of those things then come into the way in which you design your deployment for the cloud. So your application will actually end up being split up over multiple locations, and there'll be regulatory and performance and speed reasons why you would be wanting to do all of those things. The other thing that then happens is the cloud's dynamic. So all of those things may well change within a 24-hour time frame.
Right.
So we have a client, for example, who is an airline, and what the driving force that led them to come to us was that they wanted to be able to enter a new market, so fly into a new airport within 2 weeks. Whenever they wanted to.
They made a business choice,
yeah.
And what you're saying is that part of the attraction of this new model is, go for it. I
yes.
mean, what is your problem?
And the interesting thing was, they initially came up with the 2 weeks because that they thought was going to be driven by IT. They needed 10 days for the engineering. They thought, but we'll need 2 weeks for the IT. We can do the IT in a day and a half.
Right. So that is quite attractive.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you, Greg?
Absolutely. I think for corporations who are moving to the cloud, it's not a technology barrier. It's really a disclosure barrier, right? So the industry is, somewhat new, and as people are moving, it's kind of what's the right, service level agreement, or what's the right disclosure on how long the data is, where it is, what's the math or procedures behind securing the data. So as the industry evolves, those will become more clear, and there'll be standards around them, and people will make business decisions on so-and-so has better disclosure, and this is the SLA I need for maybe this type of data. But maybe this other one's got a little bit less, and that's okay because it's a brochure-oriented app, and I don't care so much about the security. So, there's an education part of it, and then there'll be a disclosure. And as we talked about, I think, earlier with the competitiveness, companies will have choices about where to run their service or their application.
Let me be willfully, this of course will shock you, let me be willfully contrary for a moment. If there's a consensus, because there's a danger of an outbreak of consensus here, this thing, you have to go to the cloud. So I know there are people watching this who want me to ask this question. What happens if I don't? What is going to happen to my business if I simply don't? Keep it short, because this may be the tipper for people watching this panel. What if I don't?
I'd actually take and pose that the analogy that I posed or stated at the beginning of globalization and the effect of globalization on the business model, and that IT is the new supply chain. IT, to be that effective supply chain, needs to move to a cloud delivery paradigm, whether that's private, public, hybrid, trusted, in that model. If you don't, that means that your cost per unit to manufacture and service and fulfill the business model is going to be higher than those that don't.
That's what I want to hear. Just want it that simple.
You're going to lose your job. I mean, the competitive...
That's simple?
You're going to lose your job because your competitors are going to do it, and then you're going to be replaced by your boss to make it more competitive.
Right, these are the things, like not scaremongering, you're saying this just like matter-of-factly.
Matter of fact.
Right? Scott?
You can take your time. You don't have to do it instantly. But if
But
you
you have to
don't
do
do
it.
you have to do it. If you don't do it, you will be left behind. There's just no question about that. It's like anything else we've seen with supply chain management and any other kinds of paradigms as they've come along. They've taken a while to get hold. But think about it, of all the big manufacturers, if you're not doing very good supply chain management right now, well, you know, you're either out of business or you're a small artisan or something that doesn't really have to worry about it too much. You have to do this.
Martin, you have to move to the cloud?
The cloud, what the cloud allows businesses to do is to be more agile in terms of moving into new geographies or new markets or new market segments. If you're not doing it, your competitors are. And as the cloud becomes more pervasive, you'll have more and more competitors who are behaving in a more agile fashion.
So, I'm convinced. I walked down to my CEO. I think he mentioned the business week, the inevitable, you know, I was flying and all the rest of it. And I say, so that's what I want. Well, talking of losing jobs, aren't you just outsourcing his job away? The CEO is not going to go anywhere with this at all. He's going to bury it, obstruct it. How do we seduce
yeah, but I think
the
that's,
CIO
into
the cloud?
So, you know, this comes back to a classic study of the CIO, or going back to what we call them data processing managers in the old days, right? So when you look at that, every CIO said they want a spot at the table, right? Have we not all, right? You know, we hear that. That's what they all want. They want a seat at the business table. So now here you are, the CIO can be the actual supply chain, which means that they are the most critical part.
So you're flipping it.
I'm flipping it,
okay,
saying the
I
cloud
like
now is finally the mechanism
it's the validation
that allows you to become that critical seat at the table, because if you don't, it's what we just all talked about going through. The reality is someone else is going to do it. So from a business growth, from a unit cost, from a lose your job to how you mature it, which is what we've all commented. The key is here's your chance to finally get the table. So if you're a strategic-oriented CIO, you do it. If you're not, well then others will, and you won't be.
I like that.
And I think the cloud needs a lot of management. I mean, the fact that you're taking this technology and making use of it, and maybe making certain parts of your organization redundant. The fact is, you still need to manage it, and you still need to put an awful lot of time into that management. The thing is that you're thinking now about SLAs, you're thinking about, are you getting the best possible deal? You're always thinking about tuning that. And so you need slightly different skills. But the fact is, the cloud doesn't make IT go away. The cloud just makes IT different.
And one of the main things I think that it does is it actually makes a lot of those decisions easier because you're not locking in. The cloud's not about lock-in, and if you then layer that on top in terms of your software layers with SaaS, in terms of your outsourcing, so you move to a third-generation SaaS, a third-generation outsourcing model, where there is no lock-in. So as a result...
Just hang on one moment. Third-generation outsourcing model, Martin? Third-generation outsourcing. What the heck was the first-generation outsourcing
First
model?
generation of outsourcing, the 80s, was your mess for less. I'm basically going to take... As the outsourcer, I'm going to take your servers, I'm going to take your people, and I'm going to sell them back to you as OPEX.
Okay, like that, yep. Your mess for less.
That's the whole of IT.
Second generation?
Second generation was where we said, well, first generation had some real hairs on it because it was just a balance sheet exercise. All I ever got was the same IP back that I used to have.
We've
Now
busted that one.
Now I'll split it up. I'll break out, so I'll outsource my email to someone, my help desk to someone, my mainframe to someone, because they've got specialised skills and they'll be able to bring me some value. And that's worked quite nicely for the last 15 years, but still has some interesting problems. You're still stuck with a 3, a 5, sometimes even a 10-year time frame. So entering into one of these relationships is a really huge lock-in, and your ability to be agile and gain benefits from it is reduced. From our perspective, the only reason those timeframes exist is because of the life of the infrastructure.
The physical infrastructure.
That's right. Move to the cloud, that time frame goes away. Why shouldn't I be able to outsource my ERP application or my payroll for a month?
Right.
Why shouldn't I be able to shift my help desk out, near Christmas if I'm a retailer, or near some other critical seasonal factor? And also, why shouldn't I be able to dip my toe in the water? Take a sort of an initial 3-month contract and go, yeah, that actually worked pretty well, but I'd actually like to change these 3 or 4 things, and then let's go again for a longer time frame. So that whole business of outsourcing, which is a large part of IT in the services space, then becomes something that you can pull apart and remove a lot of the constrained thinking. And that's one of the things that's so hard about the cloud, whether you're talking about security or outsourcing or any of these other elements. Even though IT is such a young industry, we've got so many baked in ways of thinking that you have to tear down as you move to the cloud.
That makes sense, Greg?
Absolutely.
Right, see, every word that Marty says makes sense to Greg O'Connor. And that's
Cloud sourcing, if you will.
Cloud sourcing. I was going to think, in your little 4, I think we should revisit that in your 4 chains. Outsourcing wasn't really one of the dynamics that you mentioned, even though it's implicit.
Yeah, but well, exactly. So this comes back to, all the guys have said, you have to change the way you think about approaching it. Both IT and IT is part of the business. The reason that we draw upon the concept of a supply chain is the new supply chain is who says that supply chain is, generation 1, the whole thing out, generation 2 of outsourcing, pieces out, or generation 3, which is the right mix based on whatever I want, when I want, how I want. I mean, that's what it's starting to do.
So is just-in-time IT, would that have been a better name for cloud?
Just-in-time and IT, I think, is probably an excellent analogy for business people to start to understand the IT that says, okay, to shift to this just-in-time capability, where that has applicability to the different parts of my business in terms of either performance or efficiency or agility, then how do I start to orientate? I think it was you talked about service definitions and the disciplines of service level agreements, right? And you talked about changing the design, right? And you talked about how you're managing it. All those pieces are coalescing together that have to occur, right? And those CIOs that adopt it and embrace this are going to be the CIOs that are leading their business to the next generation of its growth.
IT on demand.
If you're a CIO watching, that's the key. What we're saying is, if you're a CIO watching and you don't feel this, I mean, that's one of the things that we call them power panels. Maybe we should call them empowering panels. What we are always trying to do is trying to flag up when it's the right time to do something. You've all been hearing about it. Anybody knows that. We get it. There's a lot of stuff going on about cloud, Jeremy. There's a lot of stuff. But we look to you to gather the experts to tell us when there's absolutely the sweetest moment to push forward. And I'm strongly hearing, and I know you all have different positions, but the communality from this discussion seems to me, if we go over it, is you have to do this. We've talked about who the actors would be in that, re-empowering the CIO. It's not going to be a barrier situation. It's going to be, dude, you are going to be the king here. You're going to be popular all over again, so you embrace it. I like the sound of that. I know you deal with CIOs a lot, Marty, and have thoughts on that. I'm really now beginning to get the sense that maybe this is going to go the whole way. So we're going to always, as we do, leave viewers with, if they happen to share that position, which I'm hoping they will, what should they do next? Who is it that should do it in a company? How should they do it? We don't know, because we don't know what the company is. So, but don't get bogged down with that, because we've just got this chance to embolden people. So let's start with Greg, finish with Marty. You only have just a few seconds, really, to capture this moment and embolden the world.
So if you're a CIO and you don't have a cloud project well underway, you should put your resume together.
Okay, there's a call to action.
On a more positive spin,
I'm going to say,
I would say a CIO, a CTO has to embrace this program and understand we're going to change the operating model of the business through IT.
Say it again.
A CIO and a CTO that is embracing the cloud paradigm is going to change the operating model of business through IT.
Got that? That's why he said it again. Scott.
If you're in the trenches of IT, when that directive comes down from the executive suite that says move to the cloud, don't you want to be ready? That's what it's about.
Beautiful. And that's why you have to watch these panels. Marty.
Businesses, and this is, I'm really talking at anybody who is leading a business, need to shift and need to understand that the whole of IT will shift to a demand-based, a usage-based charging model that delivers them flexibility. And any part of what they're doing in IT that doesn't do that, they need to focus on, they need to change, they need to fix.
What I like most about power panels is that the kinds of people like you gentlemen, you actually would prefer us to get on with doing it than keep talking about it, which is unique. And it allows me to thank Greg O'Connor, CEO of AppZero, Tony Bishop, CEO of Adaptivity, Scott Morrison, CTO. We've got CEOs, CTOs, and we've spoken to CEOs. I think we've covered the waterfront here for the sea level. Last, and again not least, Marty Gauvin, CEO of Virtual Ark. If you enjoyed this power panel, it's because the cloud needs to be now. Turn off this video, start. Thank you again, gentlemen, and thank you for watching this out there on the World Wide Web.